Hello, everyone. This is Rick, and welcome to Astral Club. This is Robert Monroe's Focus Levels. Before we get into it, just want to mention Patreon. If you'd like to support the work of Astral Club, you can do so on Patreon. You get downloaded episodes that you can put on your podcast apps and listen to offline. No commercial videos, emails where we can talk back and forth. And of course, you get your advanced videos on Sunday. If you're interested, there will be a link in the description. Next up, private lessons. If you'd like to learn to astral project, be more than glad to send you the information about the class. And if you're interested, there is an email also in the description. Now, I think many of the people listening to Astral Club, if not all, know about Robert Monroe. So I almost feel ridiculous giving this famous man an intro. But Robert Monroe was a hero of mine from the age of 11 years old when I tripped across his book, Journeys Out of the Body, in it was either a B. Dalton or a Walden Books. I don't know. It was in a mall. It's what you did in the in the old days. You went to malls. I like bookstores, and I go back to the occult section. And there I finally found something that had been describing the experiences that I'd been having ever since I was a child, out of the body experiences. Finally, I found an individual who was well respected in the community, had written this book. He was a pilot, a businessman, an entrepreneur, just an amazing individual who ended up founding the Monroe Institute in Faber, Virginia. He was very much the engineer, too. And as an engineer, I believe he was trying, and he had a noble goal, to make astral projection or out-of-the-body experiences something that could be a science, could be broken down into some sort of scientific series of steps that could be more easily reproducible. I have my personal concerns about that and the ability to do that. But as an engineer, I think it was his instinct to try to organize astral projection or out-of-the-body experiences into something that could be respected as a science like physics or chemistry. To say that, I would devour his books whenever they came out would be an understatement. And he wrote 3 of them, Journeys Out of the Body, of course. The Ultimate Journey, which is the one we're going to discuss today, and Far Journeys. As an engineer, he was attracted to the scientific, organizational areas, whereas in my case, I came to very much the same conclusions independently, which I always found fascinating. I'm glad I had a lot of experiences before I encountered his books because it helped to bolster my own experiences, because as a kid, I had no experience with anything to do with out-of-the-body experiences. So what I experienced, as far as I knew, I was the only one. So when I wrote these things down, part of me worried that I was actually insane. But when I read Journeys Out of the Body, I, of course, felt validated. Now, much of Monroe's language I adopted, like idents, for instance, when I didn't have a word that I was comfortable with. However, in my successive readings and growth, as someone who's a bit of a romantic and certainly extremely interested in history, I often use terms that have a lot more in common with the older occult sciences than I do some of Monroe's more scientific approaches. I mean, look, what did the Bard say? The Bard said, roses would still smell as sweet by any other name. So whatever it is, whether I'm calling it one thing and Monroe's calling it another, as long as we're having similar experiences, potato, it's the same thing. But I thought it might be interesting just to compare his descriptions of various levels, which he termed focuses, and compare them to the typical language that I use. So that if anyone listens to Astral Club and then partakes in Monroe's books, perhaps they can have a better idea of what I'm talking about, or a better idea of what the master himself, Monroe, talked about. Now, I know what I know from him, I know from his books, and 1.5 hour talk that we had after a class in the Monroe Institute, where I just asked a question and it turned into an 1.5 hour conversation between us, which became one of the most notable memories of my lifetime. And I marveled at his approach because it was so different from mine. He had that very analytical, very engineering mindset, which I can admire because it's different from mine. And I think he also appreciated some of my approaches because I think that it caused him to look at things in a little bit of a different way as far as the out-of-the-body experiences were concerned. At any rate, I can't swear by my effect on him, but I can swear by his effect on me. So let's get into it. Now, I'm going to start with Focus 22, because that's when we start reaching the astral, the planes above physical. And that's what I think is of most interest to the people who listen to this channel. First up was his Focus 22. Now, he described that, and once again, this is from The Ultimate Journey by Robert Monroe. He described Focus 22 as where humans are still in physical existence but have partial consciousness. For example, those having near-death experiences can find themselves in this focus. Those trapped in between worlds, suffering from extreme deliriums, dementia, those who are comatose. This is an in-between state, which I don't really have an exact word for, because it's a very transitory phase, typically. Now, there are those in long-term comas, obviously, but since it's a state that is generally a state which one transitions through, I don't have a better name for it than typically Monroe's Focus 22. However, in Focus 23, he mentions that it's a level inhabited by those who recently left their physical existence, but who have not been able to free themselves from the ties to the Earth life system. And this period of time can last for, anything from minutes to hours to days, months, and years. There is no time on this level. When you are trapped in what I called the lower astral, you can exist in a timeless state, essentially vegetating, where you're trapped in some sort of a cycle, a shame cycle, an addiction cycle, something that is holding you down. Too much worry, too much greed, too much love and attachment that you're not willing to let go can also hold you fast to the earth plane, which, in the lower astral, you could describe it as a kind of purgatory from the Roman Catholic belief system. You're neither alive or dead. You're neither here nor there. You exist in this shadowy state where you exist, but there's very little thought process, very little growth. And if you are trapped in this state, and it's generally a self-generated trap, Even if you are confronted with those willing to help, you can't reach them. And I have tried numerous times. I've gotten to a point now where I can recognize an astral spirit that is trapped on the lower astral, and that has essentially put itself into an altered state that I can't reach. That is impossible to get through. You can't, in the end, help someone who doesn't want to be helped. So I would call Focus 23 the lower astral. Next up was foci 24 to 26. Monroe said that this covered what he called belief system territories. These are occupied by non-physical humans for periods of time, and often contain humans from different periods of time. Remember, when you're on the astral, time loses its meaning. It doesn't pass the same way it does here in the physical. So what he's talking about here is folks who have constructed religious or philosophical postulates that they have brought from their physical existence and made manifest with others on an astral plane. I might call something like this manifestations of heaven. The Norse would probably call it Valhalla. Others, using the more generic term paradise. The ancient Greeks called it the Elysian Fields, which they described as, beautiful pastures and forests, and everything's green and alive with glowing light, and their version of an eternal paradise. And these manifestations, or Focus 24 through 26, may become semi-permanent way stations for souls who feel they belong here. And they may have taken on beliefs in their physical that they're unwilling to surrender at this point. So they need to work through this plane before they can pass, either back into the body, physical body, or onwards. There's many of these planes. In the Bible, Jesus said that in my Father's house there are many rooms. And I think that was an indirect way of describing this particular focus that Monroe describes in Focus 24 through 26. In Focus 27, he describes it as what he calls a reception center or a park. And there's a hub. This is another artificial synthesis which is created by human minds. And it's a way station designed to ease the trauma and the shock of transition out of physical reality. Now, I have described this before. I've used the term conventionalizations, which simply means you're creating an environment that will help you to consciously understand that you're moving from one area to another, from one life to another, from one place and experience to another. And the conventionalizations that I have seen have typically been mass transit oriented, like trains and train stations, airports, planes, buses. I think the theme here is that you're not doing the driving, you're doing the riding. And I've never seen a conventionalization where someone was driving a car or their own car. Perhaps Uber and Lyfts can become conventionalizations. I mean, why not? If you're used to using them and you pass, perhaps your next Uber or Lyft driver will be someone with some afterlife connections that will convey you from the place you were to the place you're going. And I even had an episode where I described, I found myself on one of these trains that was inhabited with a number of souls which seemed to be in dreamlike states. And they were being transported. Luckily, I was recognized early enough as a soul that was still connected to the physical plane. So I was asked to leap from this conventionalization or heavenly train, and then I returned to my physical body. But that's what Monroe calls Focus 27, and that's how I describe it through a variety of conventionalizations that convey to the soul that has passed on that it is time to make that last journey. And it allows the soul the psychological room to adjust to this new change. In my life, I've always had to commute long distances back and forth to work. It's always been my lot through one reason or another. And of course, driving, an hour one way and driving an hour another or so is certainly very wearing, but it does allow you time to let go of the problems and traumas of the workday as you drive home. Therefore, you had less baggage to carry with you when you got home. Finally is Focus 28. Now, Focus 28, Monroe describes as not only beyond time, space, but beyond human thought. Residence in 28 or beyond limits any return to a physical body. I would refer to Focus 28 as the mental plane and beyond. Once your soul migrates permanently to the mental plane, there is no return to the physical. There's no purpose to returning to the physical. At that point, returning to the physical from the mental plane would be like after you graduate college or university, going back to elementary school. It wouldn't make any sense any longer. Now, I had a couple brief visits to the mental plane, but keep in mind I had a perfectly valid astral body that was still connected to a physical body. So my visit was short and not permanent in nature. But his Focus 28, I would call, once again, the mental plane and beyond. Well, that's the comparison to Robert Monroe's Focus Levels and some of the terminology that I've used in the past when describing the astral worlds, out-of-the-body experiences, what have you. So I hope you enjoyed this. If you did, please hit the like button, share it with those of like minds. Subscribe if you haven't already. Make sure that bell is solid so you're notified every Wednesday afternoon and Saturday morning when new episodes are posted. Questions and comments, please leave them on this and other videos. Many times I'll use them in a Q&A episode, or I'll use them as a whole episode in and of itself, because you guys give me great ideas. And as I've said previously, I don't have to pay you. So please leave those comments, questions, suggestions. I love that stuff. And as always, this is Rick, and I will see you on the astral plane.